Hey everybody, welcome to episode 13 of the Combat Chain podcast. I am your host, Adam Philipchuk, alongside, as always, Pat Shaw. And today we've got a special guest with us. He is fairly well known in the community. He is a ProQuest champion, host of his own podcast. Man, the accolades go on and on. But without rambling on, I'll introduce Matt Demarco, aka Flake. Welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going well. I appreciate it. Again, accolades and such. I mean, a lot of it is just me being around. So I don't think that a lot of it is not necessarily achievement as much as it is just being around. So I'm okay with that, though. That is just perfectly fine with me.
Hey, you know what? Even if you're just around at you're just the guy who's in the right place at the right time. You certainly picked the right time to be in the right place. You're on a hell of a ride, man.
It's not bad. I'm not gonna lie. Like, a lot of things have come to fruition. I've always been a proponent of the fact that hard work does in fact pay off, and sometimes there's a lot of peaks and valleys with things, but ultimately, if you just keep chugging, things will they will turn up. If you do things the right way and you work hard, you will get rewarded. And I mean, part of it is just the fact that this isn't sort of a short story, as it were. A lot of this is sort of many years in the making of where I am now versus where I began, and that's kind of at least from a broadcast perspective, or even from a card game perspective, it's been a long trek, but I'm glad to be where I'm at.
Fair enough. Well, you're the example that hard work does pay off, and I think you're what a lot of us can strive to aspire to, and what a lot of us, I think, hope to achieve is kind of what you've got going on right now. And I guess that's just a reminder then to people that if you put in the work, good things do follow. Before we get too far off, Pat, how are you today?
I am a broken down car running on rims right now with my voice. So I am hanging in there. Won't be a ton of run-on sentences from me today. So I'm just happy to have Matt on and dive into some calling Indianapolis recapping.
No, fair enough. I do have to say, with the voice a few octaves lower right now, you almost sound like, what's that? Oh yeah, song like.
oh man. Oh yeah.
There it is.
That's like that sounds like isn't that from like the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack? I think it's like that era.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
That's the one. I'm so silly me. Yeah, that's the one for sure.
I know you're better than that. I know that.
I'm sorry. I'm missing decades. That's an 80s, right? Like, that's from the 80s. The 90s is definitely my jam. I was born in the 80s, but the 90s was where I cut my teeth.
I was gonna say, am I dating myself a little bit? I'm in 86. I was born in 86.
Same. 86.
All right.
January in 86. I might be.
Really? All
yeah.
Right.
Now, are we going to go down the route of who's older here? So,
man.
I'm the 17th. I don't know about you.
25th.
Ooh, elder statesman.
You old man, you.
Unless, Adam, where are you sitting at?
I'm November of 91. You guys got me beat.
Get out of town. Yeah, all right, no problem. The adults are talking, so
I'll just sit over here quietly.
All right, no one gets away from the origin story. Who are you, Flake, and how did you get here right now?
Who are you and how did you get here? That's usually a lot of what I heard, attending parties in high school, frankly. Who are you and how did you get here? Well, there are I guess there's multiple avenues that we can discuss. I mean, are you talking about where I got here as like a caster for Flesh and Blood, or more so like are you talking about more from like the competitive aspect of card gaming, or are you talking more so about the broadcast aspect?
I'm interested in knowing how you got into the hobbies that inspired you to get into broadcasting and then competitive.
Okay, so it all began back in a long time ago, galaxy not so far away.
Yes.
Damn right. Yeah. Oh, hold on a second. So I warned you guys that I was going to get a delivery.
There it is.
There it is. Yes, this is some excellent excellent content for the show. But as we just kind of let the delivery guy up to the thing, he will knock eventually, and I will have to essentially sign for a package. But we have about 10 seconds before he gets up to here to the floor I'm on. It began many moons ago. I was, I believe, like 12 years old or 13 years old, and I got my hands on Decipher Star Wars cards, and not necessarily from a perspective of like I want to play Star Wars cards. It was just I love Star Wars and I like cards, and I had seen other card games develop in the craze of like Pokemon cards, etc. But Star Wars to me was, I'm like, damn, like Pokemon is so juvenile. Meanwhile, I'm like 12 or 13 years old, so who am I to speak? But I got my hands on a few of those, and at the time, Star Wars was widely regarded as... Hold on a second. I got the door. I'll be right back. Hell yes. God bless medication through the mail. It's the best thing ever. Sorry about that. Should I take it from the top, or do you want me to continue onward?
No, continue onward.
I'm just happy you got your blood diamonds.
They're all here. Yes, my pile of stalagmites, because people are going to know that these are very good. All right, so essentially what occurred is that at the time people regarded Star Wars CCG by Decipher as the most complex card game ever. And this was in contrast to Magic and everything else that existed at the time. And if you dive into the game now, even with all the developments that have occurred with all the different card games, it is still probably the most complex and rule-heavy kind of micromanagement type of game that has ever existed. And to me, it was like learning the rules of that. I'm like, if I learned that when I was like 12 or 13 years old, I can basically learn everything. I wasn't good at it by any means, but everything else from that point onward felt like a breeze. And that game led to like Lord of the Rings TCG, and I got into that again. All these games by Decipher, which is now defunct, but it is probably the best ever card game company that has ever existed. The current existing best card game company that ever exists, I would imagine, is Legend Story Studios. But the rules for those games were incredible. Thank you. I gotta make sure that I still have a job down the line. But ultimately, those two card games were not your typical 2 life totals type of card games. They were very different in terms of rule sets, winning conditions, how the game was developed, etc. They felt true to the source material. Star Wars felt like Star Wars, and Lord of the Rings felt like a fellowship going through the perils of getting from the Shire to Mordor. Like, that was legit what it was. I love card games, and that really enthralled me into it. But those games eventually went defunct. They stopped making cards, and I kind of gave up cards because I had nothing else until somebody many moons ago introduced me to Hearthstone when it was, I think, in open beta, or it had just released or something. And I gave that a shot, and I said, wow, you could really play cards by yourself on the toilet. Like, what kind of world do we live in? Technology is amazing. Like,
the future is
in
now.
terms of... It is. It was basically like sliced bread, moon landing, cards on the toilet. That was the tier list of the greatest achievements ever in history. That led into just, you kind of, I don't say you spin your tires in that game, but you play that so much that eventually you expand to other card games and look at other stuff. And that turned into a reintroduction to Magic, because Magic would cross my path early on. And then Hearthstone led to Gwent. And Gwent led to more and more Gwent. And that led to a broadcasting career, which led to getting interested in Flesh and Blood as something different than Magic, but another one of those life total style games. And I fell in love with this game. It was introduced to me by a gentleman by the name of Lewis Woodhouse, I believe his name is. Oh my God, it is Lewis Woodhouse. Why am I? Anyways, Lewis, his name is Woody. We call him Woody. Woody got me into the game haphazardly, and it has basically encapsulated my entire life ever since. I still play a lot of Gwent. Played a lot of Gwent today. I played several hours of Gwent today. But those are my passions. Card gaming is what I wanted to do. I've gone through so many different careers. I was, I did some stand-up comedy for a while. I worked as an intern at a sports radio station. Sports journalism was something that I was high up on my to-do list. I was competitive flair bartender for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of things,
All right.
But ultimately it all came down to the fact that I just liked performing. I liked being a performer, and just, entertaining people was the focal point of what I love to do. So when I moved to Toronto from Montreal to have one of those, wonderful and awe-inspiring desk jobs at a big corporation after I graduated, I was like, this ain't gonna sustain me. So I really just I worked hard. I would do the 9 to 5 thing. I'd come home around 6 o'clock. I'd eat for half an hour, relax, and then I'd be streaming from like 7 o'clock to 10 p.m. every single day. Every single day. I did that for many years until I basically got a kick at the can to, have an audition at a shot at being a caster for Gwent's Master Series. And it's sort of, that's where it all kind of took off. Was my first big opportunity was from CDPR and the great people there. So I owe them a lot of my career, is the fact that they saw me and they gave me a chance. I don't want to say they rolled the dice. I was confident that I could do it, but they were the ones who were like, all right, you know what? We're going to give you a chance, but we're also going to let you flourish with your personality. We're going to let you be you. Whereas everyone else, not that they weren't like that with everybody else, but I mean, there were situations where I was sort of reined in various different capacities to say, okay, you gotta abide by these rules. You gotta be rigid and follow within this framework. Like, we get it. You love Star Wars, but just stick to the plan. So the fact that they gave me a lot of room to spread my wings was incredible, because it really allowed me to find my stride in terms of my style and in terms of just enjoying myself and not letting it feel like work and not worrying about it. But that whole trek from 12 years old to where I am today is, there's a lot of connecting links on that combat chain, so to speak, that got me from where I am there and my first toe dipped into that pool to where I am today. And I'm just rambling here, and I apologize, but that's the gist of it.
I love it. And I see what you did there with the combat chain. We appreciate that.
Gotta go back to the source material, right? You gotta go back to make sure that we remember that this is not a Star Wars podcast. It's not a Flake is a Nerd podcast. It's a Flesh and Blood podcast.
But today's episode is about one of the people behind Flesh and Blood, because I think at this point it is fair to say that you are becoming an established household name in the Flesh and Blood scene, and I think that is worth acknowledging. But before we get further into where you're going, I do want to ask a little bit more about Gwent. I personally, it's actually funny, I come from a little bit of a Gwent background, nothing like you, but I remember picking up The Witcher 3 and playing Gwent, and that got me into Magic, which got me into Flesh and Blood eventually. But a lot of people don't actually know what Gwent is. And I think you're probably the perfect person to help us understand a little bit more about Gwent.
So Gwent it's a card game, but what people need to sort of disassociate from card games are life totals. And that entire stigma that a game is two people at a certain health total and you have to chip away at their health in various different ways. It's not that. Gwent is very unique in the sense that, I think that one of the best ways that somebody had described it in terms of selling it to somebody who doesn't know about it is, imagine a card game where you draw reliably 80 to 85% of your deck. There's no cost to play a card. You can play your best card on turn 1 if you want to, and there's minimal to almost zero RNG elements. There's nothing that is really going to completely, roll. There's no dice rolls. There's none of that. So it truly becomes a game of deck construction, resource management, meta analysis, and turn planning, and just the strategy of playing your turns, because it's not, each game is 3 rounds and you need to win 2 of the 3 rounds in order to win the game. And at any time you could pass out of a round. And if your point total in that round is lower than your opponent's, well, then you lose the round. But at the same time, losing a round by not giving up too many of your best cards is strategically a smart move to do. If they're committing big pieces, you can kind of slow play them so they commit too much, where that you have a better advantage in the next 2 rounds. So It is incredibly different than what you might see in The Witcher 3. It has gone through several reworks over time. Currently, it's in its current iteration. It is a fantastic game, and I do recommend everybody checks it out. It also has, and I'm not saying this because I like the game and I'm a caster for the game. I'm saying this because it is just it's a statistical and data backed up fact. It has the best free to play model of any card game, at least that I've ever heard of. I mean, aside from a card game that just gives you everything for free and you have access to everything, you can ask anybody who I've introduced the game to or who's jumped in and put in 10 hours into the game. You can have a competitive deck in 10 hours of play without dropping a single penny on the game. You can legitimately have something that you're proud of in 10 hours of gameplay. Now, you can't necessarily say that about all kinds of games, and I know that games like Runeterra have excellent economic models. Gwent blows it out of the water. Like, I don't know how else to say it. I haven't, and I'm not shy to say this, I haven't spent a dime on that game in probably 4 years, partially because I played it so much. But at the same time, the money I spend on it is for cosmetics, purely from a perspective of supporting the game. But in terms of actual cards, I haven't spent a dime on cards in probably 4 years. And the game itself, it rewards deck building, meta-analysis, planning, resource management in the game. It's really a game for people who like to really sit and think, and not get like gotcha'd, like, this person randomly generated a card that screwed me. Like, it's not that type of game. But for those who have trouble understanding the rule set, it does take some time and some patience to actually get into. It's going to take you a couple hours to really grasp the concept of what it is, because you need to detach yourself from the fact that the cards you play on the board do not attack anything necessarily. They're not there to push face. There's no face to attack. There's no aggro in that regard. So, yeah.
No aggro, no face smashing.
That's it. And I get it. And so there's no mono red. There's no Cheerios Briar, as it were. There's no.
Sounds terrible. I was on board for a while.
There's no pirate warrior from whatever. Like, that doesn't exist. It's just, it's not out there. So you can't just rely on a fact that you can, crank out a game in 5 minutes or decide that you're not going to win it in 2 or 3. The amount of games that I've played that seemed hopeless, but you cobble together some good strategy, you bluff your opponent, and suddenly you're back in the W column. So I recommend this game to anyone who wants something that isn't within that life total type of framework that exists for so many other card games.
That's excellent. It makes me want to start a Gwent podcast. I think you already got one going, though.
I do. You're more than welcome to come on there and talk about it as a new player to the game or to the experience. But yeah, I mean, the Gwent podcast I have, if you're very interested, is called Flurza, which is essentially a name between myself, Flake, and the community manager for Gwent by the name of Pavel Berja. So him and I have the Flurza podcast. But anyways, that's out there as well. So
you just recently, before the calling, took down a ProQuest. That is not an easy task to accomplish. I scrubbed out. This guy over here won one. So you guys have that in common. Leading up to that, how seriously did you take being competitive in Flesh and Blood? Like, when did you decide to make that transition? Like, you had to go into the tank in order to get to where you were to win a ProQuest. Tell me about deciding that this is something that you were going to do, how you went about it, like your play testing regimen, and your time leading up to winning a ProQuest.
All right, so I want to be clear about something real quick. I did not technically win a ProQuest. What I did was I got to the finals, and I was up against somebody who was there with their team. Their team, amongst the 4 of them or so, already had 2 ProQuests to their name, and the dude that I was going to play against needed a PTI. I am, unless something happens, I will be casting the Pro Tour, so I cannot play in it. So we basically split. So technically, the way that it worked out was the way that the prizes were split was that I got the gold foil and he got the PTI, and the game never occurred. So I never refer to it as me winning the PTI. I always, whenever I reference that whole that match or that tournament, I say that I took home the PTI, because technically I didn't win the gold foil. I took it home, and that's how I refer to it. And I want to give some props to that team out of Montreal, and the four individuals who were there. The gentleman who actually took home the PTI from that tournament is named Alexandre Lefebvre from Montreal, and the team is also, there's Michel Corvino, there's Carl Del Duquetto, and Nicolas Plouffe. And these four people were awesome, and I got to not only hang out with them at that particular tournament, but also at several others that were occurring in the region. But they took it down. Was I confident that I could win? Of course I was confident I could win. I was on a freaking heater. I think I was the number 2 seed in that tournament, and I was feeling really good. I had beaten players like Matthew Dilks. I had beaten like some of the best players that are out there. And I was very confident because I was a higher seed than Alex was, and I was going to go first on Starvo, and I felt like it was going to be pretty good. But I do want to clear the air. I don't want to take any credit where credit isn't due. That's what happened. In that case, however, I did play in 5 pro quests, and I top 8'd 3 of them. So I was pretty happy about that, because I feel like the field was pretty strong as well. There was a lot of people that are out there who, frankly, have multiple, PTIs to their name and lots of ProQuest wins and other major tournaments under their belts. But the process to becoming a competitive player, I mean, I never considered myself a competitive player, nor do I to this day. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm a broadcaster by trade, by career, by choice, by passion. The competitive side of the gaming to me is what I feel is a responsibility to everybody who listens to me on whatever media that they're listening to me. Most prominently on the broadcasts as a caster for the callings or for nationals or for the upcoming pro tour. I feel like if I am not on top of my game, it is a disservice to everyone else who is listening to these matches. If I am not as good as I can possibly be, the people who are watching it, why it comes down to, why should they trust me? Why should they listen to me? This is just some random schmuck who is naming the titles of cards that are hitting on the board. I need to be able to understand the strategies that are employed, the lines of play, the lines of victory, and how that entire board state and game state evolves, and how each player would or should react to it. Now, am I going to be right all the time? Probably not, because if I was right all the time, I'd likely be up there at, winning these events. But at the same time, that shift to competitiveness came off of the fact that I had this initial urge and responsibility that I felt to the broadcast that I should be the best, but then that translated into actual results. So I was the 2nd seed at the Hairy Tarantula Pro Quest. I lost to an incredibly poised and amazing player by the name of Raymond Chow, who is essentially my nemesis. I was up 40-11, I think, in a prism mirror with everything going my way, and I made one critical mistake, and he never panicked, and he came back and won that game. I think ultimately 1-0 or something like that. It was a nail biter. I had everyone in the venue surrounding that table, just being like, "Holy Moses, what a game!" And it was excellent to be a part of it. But the practice I put in, the time I put in, was with really, really, really amazing players. I practiced with national champions. I practiced with multiple ProQuest winners, purely from the perspective of, I want to learn. I want to know where all these, where you're seeing these lines. Talk to me, Goose. Give me all of those thought processes that are going through your mind that I can't see. I don't want to know what the right play is. I want to know why it's the right play. I don't care about losing. I don't care about being told I'm wrong. I want to know why I need to sequence this turn this way, or why I should block, or why I shouldn't block, or why I should not swing hammer and arsenal a card, or pressure or whatnot. So I'm privileged and so lucky that a lot of the people that I get to interact with regularly in this game are some of the best players in the world, hands down. Players like Tariq Patel, players like Matt Folks, players like Dalen Mack. These are some of the best absolute players in the world, and I'm lucky enough to be able to at certain times, just observe the process. And it has translated to great results at various pro quests, but also being able to understand the lines of play. So when those situations do come up in these tournaments, I'm not just speaking out of my ass. I'm actually making sense, and I'm actually coming from a position of, here's why this is the way it should be. And hopefully that's to the benefit of the viewers who are watching the broadcast.
Well, and you certainly do such a good job. We just saw you coming out of the Indianapolis calling, you alongside, God, I don't know if I ever get this one right, Brian Gottlieb?
Yeah, Brian Gottlieb, great person who, that was the first time I met him and the first time I worked with him. And as soon as I met him, it was like he treated me like we had been working together for years. And as soon as the camera went on and we had our first match together, it was just boom, instant chemistry, instant understanding, instant, that kind of just, all right, we're in this together. We got a job to do. Let's have fun while we do it. So big props to Brian, because he's an absolute professional.
No, that's that. And I mean, yeah, you're both professionals, so of course it makes sense that it flows naturally, for at least from the perspective of all of us watching from home, because that's certainly my perspective was you guys knocked it out of the park. I do also want to give credit to Tan and Grace, though. He was also...
don't do that. Don't give credit to Tan and Grace. Don't give Tannen any credit. Tannen, by the way, okay, off the record, don't let him say that I said this, but Tannen is somebody who, when I was thrown in as sort of a fourth option at U.S. Nationals, the second that it went off, and I was part of that crew, he treated me like a colleague. He treated me like a part of the group. He treated me like a brother. We shared a hotel room for that all 3 or 4 of those nights, and he made sure that I was included and I was never overlooked. And I felt like an outsider to a degree, like walking in and not knowing anybody. But immediately he's like, "This is Flake. He's good people. Why, like he's gonna crush it." And you can edit all of that out and just go back to the fact that Tannen's okay. He's an okay, all right. He's an okay guy.
Yeah, and you know what?
I think. Go ahead.
Little Tannen story of my own. When we were in Vegas, for the I don't know if you want to call it a pre-release of the world premiere or whatever of Tales, when we were seated at the tables for deck building, Tannen ended up being seated at our table. And to his credit, just the friendly guy he was, immediately getting to know everybody at the table. And yeah, no, I can totally see how he can be that way at all times, because it's certainly shown. And it's you always hear about, like, you don't want to meet your heroes or anything like that, but Tannen is I think one of those examples of someone who you meet him and he lives up to the...
He is most definitely not my hero, but he is good people. He's absolutely good people.
Yeah.
I think one of the big public takeaways from the calling was just how, I think from top to bottom, it was a quality event. I think a lot of that comes from the tangible chemistry the 3 of you guys had in the broadcast booth. I think that the spread between from the whole weekend, I think, was something special. I don't know if it was, just not just the level of the competition, but the quality of the individual matches, the spread of featured matches. I think the opportunity to call some of those unique matchups and just high quality play. You went there as a player, and then you ended up as a caster there. What exactly happened to get you over there?
Well, I had a ticket like everyone else. I had my deck that I had toiled over like crazy up until literally the morning of me driving to Buffalo. The plan was literally get to Buffalo the evening before, meet my really good friend John Blevins. We're gonna go. We went for dinner with his lovely girlfriend. We had a good time, and it was like basically, all right, like, I'm going to ride the couch, set the alarm for 1:45 a.m., and at 2 in the morning, we were going to hit the road and make the long trek, the 8-hour trek to Indianapolis, so we can be ready for a whole day of side events and then get prepped and relax in the evening and then wake up and go nuts. It's a calling. Like, that was my first ever calling, and I was super excited. And not only that, but I was exceptionally confident. I came off of that whole ProQuest season playing very good players and being very happy with my gameplay. But ultimately, at about, I don't know, 11 p.m., like maybe quarter to 11 p.m., I get a phone call from Tannen Grace. And typically if I get a phone call from Tannen Grace, it's because the Atlanta Braves have beat the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's usually the only reason that he would contact me in such an hour. But it was basically, I answered him like, Tan, and like I was worried. I was like, Tan, are you okay? Like, is everything all right? And he's like, what kind of clothes did you pack? I'm like, dude, I don't know, like jeans and a t-shirt and a sweater. Like, I don't know what else to say. He's like, okay. I'm like, what's up? He's like, well, Craig Krempels, who I've never met, and it's unfortunate that it occurred the way it did because he was supposed to be there, and you know, I hope he got sick, and I believe he's long since recovered, and I'm glad that he did, and I hope to meet him and work with him one day. But that was it. He couldn't make it. So there was this long-standing scramble of, okay, like basically what they told me was, all right, just watch your email because you're going to get an email shortly. And I'm like, dude, I got like 3 hours of sleep. Like I'm going to get 3 hours of sleep. I can't stay up and, you know, just look for that email to come in, but I did, and I barely slept. I slept maybe an hour. I got an email from SCG saying, "Hey, can you do it? You down to do it?" And I'm like, "Let's go, let's do it." So we drove to we drove to Indianapolis. On the way there, I made we dropped our bags off and we went to TJ Maxx, where I spent probably about $20 on 2 button-up shirts, and then Tannen let me his blazer, which is right over there because I'm down to sell it as a game-worn Tannen Grace authentic jersey that I'm maybe gonna submit to the Smithsonian of card gaming one day. But that was it. It was very much a complete 180 to what I was planning on doing. And arriving on the Friday, I played in side events, and I went undefeated in all the side events. So I was like, dude, I really, really want to play in the calling now because I'm so confident. All the CC events I played in, I didn't lose. So I was like, holy Moses. Like, I'm on an absolute heater here. Like, how can I not play tomorrow? But my passion is with broadcasting, and I just put the deck in the sleeves in the hotel, showed up at at 8:30 in the morning the next day and just went to work, and that was that's how that went. There was literally just a random, I don't say random phone call, but a phone call that basically essentially turned that entire trip on its head for me in the best ways possible.
So from the caster's perspective, you got to watch that whole event go down. Give me your big picture takeaway from from that weekend in terms of play, in terms of heroes. What did you think of that?
Absolutely. Okay, first thing I want to do is just completely sidetrack this and mention that I just noticed what the title of this episode was, and I full on and wholeheartedly approve. This is perfect. The big picture takeaway from this is that the average player is now so much better than they were back at any of the other callings. That the complete skill set, the level of player has risen tremendously. And I had a discussion with Matt Rogers on my podcast a little while ago, and he made that same assessment because I asked him about being world number 1, which he currently is no longer. That title is held by Michael Hamilton. But I asked him, I said, how worried are you? And he said, dude, the entire field is so much better that everybody is elevating their game. And that was absolutely that was just so apparent at this tournament. I cannot say enough about the level of gameplay that every game that I got to cast, every game that I paid attention to, I did take like 1 or 2 games off to go and basically eat and just kind of, just sort of eat gummy bears in the corner and just kind of hydrate. But every game I watched of the 12 rounds of Swiss, I watched 10 of them, I was a part of 10 of them, so, into it. Every game that I watched from start to finish was almost pretty much a masterclass. Very few errors, very few misplays or missequencing, but most of it was just impressive. And I think that the calling in Indianapolis was such a great showing for the world of those who do not know necessarily what Flesh and Blood is or are not familiar with it, or who might be skeptical of the fact that it's just a tax and a health total. How is this different than anything else? This game, that tournament itself, was such a beautiful demonstration to the world of just how complex and layered Flesh and Blood is. So the best takeaway from this is that each game was a beautiful exhibition of what the game should be, and that every player seems to have moved up a notch. Every game was not a gimme. Players like Tariq Patel did not make the top 8. They were out before they even completed 12 rounds, so to speak. That there were multiple, major tournament winners who didn't even get to see day 2. It was that much of a gauntlet. It was that much of a murderer's row of players that the people who are playing are really taking this to another level, and that can only be incredibly beautiful for the whole game. And I am so excited to see where this goes.
It really did seem like there was a convergence in Indianapolis. The level of player that made a point to get there, it just seemed like everyone who was anyone decided that this was the weekend that they were going to come. And I think definitely the quality of player and the profile of player, it just seemed like every feature match had what you might consider a marquee person getting in front of that camera and watching them play. It was definitely very exciting. From a meta perspective, how do you feel about how the hero breakdown was going into day 1? Are you happy with that? Is 28% Starvo okay with you?
I think it's okay, and I might be in the minority in terms of saying like this is fine. And I think that it's a situation of all these living legend points and how many it has and blah blah blah. That's what living legend is for. So all these people are like, look how many living legend points it has. Obviously it's a problem. Yeah, obviously it's a strong hero, and it's gonna get to living legend, and then living legend will have done what it was supposed to do. So do you want to ban it before it hits living legend, making basically living legend useless? Like, I don't get it. Like, Is Living Legend out there to ban a hero that's been around for 10 years and slowly accumulating points? Or is it there as a net to catch the big bad wolf that has been basically prowling a meta for a little while? In reality, how many big tournaments has Starvo been around? A lot of the fatigue about Starvo was seeing all the pie charts that have essentially been published and printed regarding ProQuest data. And I get it. Everybody's like, oh, it's another Starvo. It's the Triangle of Doom. It's this and that. Yeah, there's always going to be better decks that are out there than other decks. And I'm sorry if you're an Azalea stan here and you don't get to play that and successfully. Your day might be coming soon. It might happen. But ultimately, I think that the meta itself is going to shift and sway. And I mean, is this any different than the chain meta? Is this any different than the Briar meta? Is this any there's always going to be a big bad wolf, and the people who are out there trying to basically rein it in. That deck is Starvo is gonna be flying real high. If it's too close to the sun, then Living Legend is gonna singe its wings. But otherwise, you can't always rely on LSS to clip those wings before it flies that high. So in this case, I think that it's fine. I think it's okay. And I really believe that given the fact that there's no online client to accelerate how the meta will shift and sway to essentially, what's the term? To essentially correct or readjust to what it is, you need tournaments for people to have a chance to put the time and the work in to go in and see how those things happen, because playing at a local armory for a cold foil is not necessarily an indicator of what the best decks are. It's just what you want to bring to that particular tourney, or maybe catch some average players or casuals off guard. In reality, I think that it's okay to have several strong decks. It might not feel good when you might get paired up against so many Starvos in one particular tournament, but at the same time, how can you fault the best players in the world from not playing the best decks at the biggest tournament that's going on? Are you really going to get mad at somebody? Like, I've seen the salt that occurs when somebody's like, oh, great, another Starvo. Like, I've sat across from those players. I'm like, well, I want to win this tournament. Clearly you don't, because you're bringing dash or whatever. I get it. And there's no fault in doing that. If you're confident, I played against a dash player who whooped my ass when I was on Prism and played a really close game with me again the next weekend on dash, as with myself on Starvo. it's possible, but at the same time, when players really want to win, they're going to take the strongest option and refine it to the meta and go that way. So I think the meta's all right, and I only say it's all right because there's still the Pro Tour, and then there's going to be changes. There might be bans and restrictions or whatever, but it's okay because there's an expiry date on it. If it was like this and there was nothing along the horizon to sort of reel it in or change it, then I would suggest that it might be problematic. But the fatigue of seeing Starvo all the time, I get it, but there's an expiry date on that. So you got to kind of pump your brakes on the fact that you're criticizing the best players in the world, taking the best decks in the world to the biggest tournaments in the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. Our meta is probably the healthiest I think it's been in a while. Like, when you compare this to Chain meta or Briar meta, like Seed's Chain was oppressive. That was, you either needed to specifically try to beat that deck or play that deck. And same thing when Briar came along, a lot of people were playing Briar. And this time around we have, it's almost a three-way split between, Starvo gains the slight edge, but between Starvo, Viserai, and Prism, there are still fairly close games across those three matchups. It's fair to say that, now we do have the BNR announcement coming on. Is it April 4th is our next one, I believe?
April 5th.
April 5th. And it'll be interesting to see what LSS does. If they don't do anything, I'm fine with it. I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. I mean, if they do something, I think it'll be interesting for Jersey. Then we'll just have to explore and figure out what the new meta is. And I'm not opposed to that challenge, but if the status quo stays as it is, I think that's fine.
You think they'll do something, both of you?
I can see them making Oakenold an Oldham specialization, but I don't think that you really want to touch and mess with a hero that is. It's tough again because the problem is you don't want to create a situation where it's unplayable ahead of a Pro Tour without new cards coming in, so that Viserai just reigns supreme, and that's what would happen. Viserai would essentially reign supreme because it would out aggro. Chain wouldn't have enough time to basically digest and create enough soul shackles to have those pop-off turns, and Prism wouldn't be able to keep up. Prism's not favored against it, but Prism might be a slight edge to maybe 50-50 against Starvo. A great Prism player will beat a Starvo player. However, if you just kill Starvo, well, have fun seeing 6 of 8 top 8 players being Viserai. That's what you're in for. You might catch a Chain or two in there, but that's what it'd be. Maybe you catch like an Alexi or an Oldham or something along those lines. But frankly, that's the way it goes. And I don't think that I can see taking away a massive, reliable tool like Oakenold away from Starvo. I can see that happening and still maintaining a lot of the power level, minus one of those major, reliable, cheap disruption tools. But beyond that, I don't think that you should do anything to it. Like, honestly, maybe the whole idea of a pulse only representing one element on your fuse could do it. But at the end of the day, man, just take them off their leash, man. Let them fly. Let them go. Let them run,
Yeah, and you're right. At the rate Starvo's going, it won't be long till the Living Legend's out anyway. We've got maybe, if things stay as is, we've got maybe a couple months left of this, and then we're on to something new. At the absolute
a Pro Tour.
Yeah, at the absolute latest, I'm sure at the rate he's going, he can be Living Legend out before. God, that's how do you say that? Living Legended out.
I don't know. Do you call it just gilded? Do you call it I don't know how to call it. I would call it just gilded. Just he's golden, baby. He's gone. But
there you go.
I mean, like you mentioned, a few more months. How many? The only time that I really put my toe into competitive Magic was around Dominaria, and when that was in Standard, and how many people and how many Teferis and how many people counting the months and days and years until certain cards got rotated out because they were so toxic and oppressive and whatever. Like if you're playing a card for a really strong card for maybe 4 or 5 months, and then it's gone, like that's pretty damn sweet, man. Because I've played in metas where there were cards that were on the chopping block that we could not wait. Like you pop champagne when standard rotation occurs and those cards are gone, and then new ones come in and ruin your day anyways. But ultimately, like if Starvo's reign is only that long, then that's not bad. That's the system doing what it should do.
Yeah, 100%. Now, to speak to the other side of the perspective, there's always rumors flying left, right, and center. One of the rumors I have heard is that it is possible that Starvo gets retired, per se. If that is the case, I think, to go back to your point about Viserai, I think they need to do things to rein in Viserai as well, if that's the case. I don't know if that means dealing with a card like maybe Revel. I know Revel and a combination of Revel and Mordred can be the culmination of just huge turns, and you can't necessarily deal with Mordred because Mordred then doesn't totally, but goes a huge part into hampering the OTK strategy. But you can't...
Terrifying me right now.
You can't...
Viserai.
You can't deal with... I agree. You can't deal with Starvo without maybe dealing with Viserai as well then. Do you go even further and do something to Prism? I don't think so. I think Prism, though Prism is strong, Prism is something that is still requires a lot of finesse in piloting. It's not something you just pick up and win with. I don't even...
And you know where we're at? If you do that, you know where we're at again? We're at Chain again.
Yeah,
we're at Chain,
exactly,
and we're at Briar, like Earth Briar, like the one that Sam Dando played, something along those lines. That's where we're at. Maybe Ice Lexi, like that's where we're at. But you're gonna see again Chain, and then Chain's gonna get people are gonna start begging for Chain to be touched or messed around with. So if you start going down that slippery slope of, well, if we touch this, then we're gonna have to adjust this, and then this is gonna be too powerful. So at which rate? Maybe you know what you're doing there? Standard rotation. That's what you're doing. If you're touching everything, then you're doing a standard rotation, and that's not what they're looking at here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think that even furthers the argument then that things should probably be left alone.
It's as healthy as it can be right now. If you do it, if you try to do anything else with it, you're gonna mess with the whole format.
Yeah, I agree. So. Yeah, no, hopefully then, based off all that, they leave it alone. But we've been caught off guard before. Things like Ball Lightning getting banned. I know that wasn't on anybody's radar. Well, I shouldn't say anybody's radar. I do know Kugani was calling for the banning of Ball Lightning, and
he's calling for Awakening, by the way. So
is he?
He's actually been very good about projecting bans, and he has been calling for Awakening.
Maybe that's the trick. Maybe we'll give up Awakening.
Hey, the calling champion did not run Awakening. Run Awakening. So that's, if anything. And when I spoke to him, I had an interview. I interviewed him yesterday, and yesterday being, I guess, the 23rd of March. And I asked him about it, and he said, "It's in many games, it's a do nothing blue pitch that doesn't block." And I said, all right, I feel you. Like, at the same time, everybody plays it because it's a fantastic thing to do to catch up when you're getting your ass kicked. But at the same time, if you're in the lead, it is a tempo killer, ladies and gentlemen. It is just there to draw and make you feel like garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you can maybe make the argument that it's a sideboard card. But yeah, it's probably dead. It's probably bad more often than it's good, and then it's just people are so high on it because the times when it's good, they're like, yeah, but I casted a Pulverize for free, and it's like, cool, but every other time you probably lost the game because you drew it when you needed to draw a card that could block or something like that.
All right. Got lost in the weeds there a little bit. I do want to.
That's what we do best.
we do. It is on brand. Circling back to the calling, I think because that was such a high-profile event and there's such high stakes in the match, we started to have a couple breakout stars. I think in the format, and I think that's positive for the game. And whether you like it or not, you're one of them.
Oh, I
Mr.
appreciate
Flake.
it. Well, thank you kindly.
From a competitor standpoint, I think the breakout of the weekend was Mr. Fino Black on Prism going 100-0 going up to the finals here against Michael Hamilton. How does how did that run look from your end? His Prism deck and his quirky name there.
So, from the broadcasting perspective, all we crave is storylines and narrative, because if it's just a bunch of randos doing rando things, like it's difficult to cobble together a story when there's really nothing that jumps out at you. I mean, if the top 8 was 3 Starvos, 3 Viserais, 2 Prisms, it wouldn't make for good TV, as it were. The fact that the players who they were and the games and their trek through the Swiss round and the story and the journey that they were on was so enthralling. Somebody like Fino Black going 10-0 before finally losing, being in the finals on Prism, it was exceptional, honestly. And the fact that Michael Hamilton, the way that it was drawn up was great, because the top 4 was, you had your, I think there was a chain. I don't know if there was I believe there was a chain.
I believe it was Cody Williams and Michael Hamilton in a rematch, and it was I don't know what the other.
It was Sam Dando and Fino Black, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. And Cody and Hamilton were the featured, was the streamed match, and Dando and Fino were not.
It's all a blur to me now. I forgot exactly what the exact matchups and such were, but ultimately, when you have somebody like Fino Black on Prism with the record that he has as the top seed, and then you have people like Sam Dando bringing Briar that really just set the pace and saying, hey, there are other ways to do aggro, there's other ways to do Runeblade. It was phenomenal. And then you have Cody Williams really putting Chain back on the map, so to speak, and saying, hey, this is a deck that's still good. And watching how he played it was fantastic. But equally, you have players like Michael Hamilton who go up against these Chain players who are catching people off guard and completely, just flipping the page in terms of what you think the strategy is against Chain. Because if you're Starvo and you're going first and you got a fuse, sometimes you're thinking, all right, I'm going to clap you in the face and it's just going to be all downhill for you. I've got about 3 or 4 turns before things get real ugly, so I'm going to maximize it. But the patience and the poise that Michael Hamilton had in terms of taking the fatigue route on that game, and then having the beauty of having a rematch and thinking like, holy hell, this is a rematch where maybe Michael changes his strategy, maybe he changes his sideboard, maybe Cody Williams changes his strategy, which he did in that matchup. You'll notice, off those Soul Shackle 2, 3, 4, he was stockpiling all of his Banish Zone with Blood Debts because he wanted that massive pop-off turn. He didn't want to whiff late when it mattered. He wanted to keep it in there. And knowing that Michael Hamilton was just going to sit back and watch everything and block everything out, his end game was fatigue. It wasn't through damage. So Cody knew that he could take blood debt damage in order to have a very explosive turn. So even from one game to the next in the same day, the landscape of it and how it played out was different, even though the strategies were more or less uniform. It was great to see how that Final Four shaped out, and the finals was exceptional as well. The entire top 8 was great to behold. Now, would it be nice to see like a Katsu up there or a Lexi up there, or anything other than the big 3? But ultimately, there wasn't even a Viserai in the top 8, which was pretty surprising in general. So I'm very happy with what the top 8 looked like, because it was enough of a snapshot of what the meta should look like. Plus, it put into perspective the fact that there are decks outside of the Triangle of Doom that are not only viable but are threatening.
I do want to correct myself here. I was remembering the Sam Dando match from the quarterfinals. The top 4 was Fino Black versus David Roode and Sam Dando versus Michael Hamilton.
You beat me to it. I just checked as well.
Yep. I was looking at that as you were talking. I was like, man, I do remember that. Fino is actually local to my area. I cannot win a ProQuest because he exists.
Has he sold you a Remember Your Tunic Triggers shirt yet, or is that down the line? I have to do.
It is. It appears to be it on the Facebook Marketplace group. It's pretty active with the memory right now.
Definitely. Well, I will say this: he played like an absolute maestro, but at the end of the day, stamina, endurance, mental focus, etc., is all part of the game. It's all part of playing your cards and preparing for a tournament. And if Michael Hamilton, he could have made mistakes and he didn't, or he could have missed triggers and he didn't. So it's all part of the game. I would not think that a missed tunic trigger would have dictated the outcome of that game. But ultimately, the fact that there was that there, you know what? Part of it. It's part of it. Nobody plays cleanly, but ultimately Michael Hamilton played just maybe a little bit cleaner than Fino did. But that game was stellar. That game, I would love to just rewatch it over and over and over again, because it shows the patience in the game plan of Michael Hamilton, and just the methodology of Fino on that list and what that list is meant to do and how well he played it. It was two top-tier, world-class players playing their lists so well. Somebody had to win, somebody had to lose, and that's basically how it goes. But man, what a good game.
Yeah, it was. It was a nail biter right down to the end. Mistakes happen, and like you say, that's part of the game. And I think at that world-class level, that's where games in part are won. It is two players, two titans going at it until eventually somebody misses something, somebody makes a mishap, and the other person's able to seize the advantage. And that was evident in the finals, but despite that, it was just an incredible game, and that's what we hope to see at the end of the day, I think.
What was your favorite game of the weekend? Was it the finals, or is there another one?
Honestly, it's tough to say. I mean, look, I've got to say this, is that there was a match between an aggro Katsu player and a Bravo showstopper, a gentleman by the name of Clark. I don't have his last name offhand, and I'm going to get it.
Clark Jansen and Alberto Ruiz.
There we go. Alberto Ruiz and Clark Jansen. And I'm going to say that I just loved casting this match, because these were matches that really reminded me of when I was playing in Road to Nationals and various armories. When I had just got into the game, I had played a Katsu, and I had bumped into enough not Starvos, Bravos with pummel, nothing like an Anothos with a pummel chaser, so to speak, just to kind of just put you in your place. That has happened so many times, and that was one of the highlights for me, was being able to cast that match. So part of the difficulty of this is the fact that we know as the tournament's going to progress, you're going to have the best decks bubble to the top, and there's going to be less variety. Ultimately, it really worked out, because we got to see Chain and Briar and a lot of cool decks late into the tournament. But early on, we wanted to go ahead and find some nice spice, as it were. So at one point, I had tasked Tannen Grace. I said, Tannen, I know it's not my birthday, but go find me a Katsu that you can put on screen. And he comes back, he's like, I got you, buddy. I'm like, not only is it a Katsu, it's a Katsu playing Bravo. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. He's like, no, not Starvo, Bravo. I was like, we got a Bravo and a Katsu that are like positive winner. They're like, we got two, I think it was like 3-1 players. And I'm like, a lock and load, let's do this. And holy Moses, was that fun. It was probably the most refreshing match to play, but probably one of my most favorite matches to call was likely the rematch between Michael Hamilton and Cody Williams, merely because they had already faced each other, and Michael took a very I don't want to say unorthodox approach, unorthodox for Starvo, but at the same time, you see Cody adapt to the strategy in the rematch, and you see Michael also having some more difficulty in terms of closing it out. And that last turn where you flip over all your cards off Soul Shackles, and you're just basically, as the Starvo player, as Michael Hamilton, you're basically a passenger for the rest of that. And it's like, all right, and you see the gears turning, you see the calculations, Cody trying to figure this one out, and it's like the last 2 minutes of a basketball game. It takes like 30 minutes, but it's just, that's kind of how it goes. It just takes forever, but ultimately you have all the pieces in front of you, and you have to piece together this monstrosity of a puzzle to win or lose the game. And that is an unenviable position that I never want to be in, because I don't play chain, and I don't want to, because I don't want that stress. But as a broadcaster, the narrative was there, the stakes were there, and the gameplay was exquisite. So that is most likely my favorite match from the tournament.
We're going to talk about storylines. I would say that coming into the Pro Tour, if those two get matched up, because I highly doubt their heroes will change by then, I think that'll be a good match to watch. People will be looking forward to that.
Oh, we're going to be hunting through the pairings like crazy, because this is the Pro Tour is essentially the who's who of flesh and blood. And, you know, not to discredit or not to disrespect anyone else in the tournament, but when we're looking to put people on screen, we're looking for people who have, notoriety or wins under their belt or whatever, like especially early on, before the records basically dictate who's on screen. You want the people who are, really playing for something to be on screen. So those first few matchups in New Jersey is going to be real tough to figure out who the hell you're going to put up there. Like, are you going to put up Michael Hamilton versus Matt Rogers, or are you going to put up, Tariq Patel versus Fido Black? Like, what are you doing? There's so much that you're going to have to make tough decisions about. So I'm just going to let Tannen do it, and then I'm going to blame Tannen if it goes awry.
Perfect.
I do. We were going to start transitioning into something else, but I'm going to take us off the rails again. How much control do you have in who is the feature match? Is that between you three?
So it depends on the organizer. I mean, when I was working with Channel Fireball for the Nationals, maybe it's just purely because I was, the newbie, so to speak. So I didn't really have much creative control or directional control in terms of what is shown. But the way that the procedure of how this works typically is once the pairings are fired off, the judges rush the pairings to us, like the whole stack of like 10 printed sheets of pairings, and we go through the list of whoever has the most wins, and then we pick out who's there, and then we're also scouting. Whoever's not broadcasting out of the three of us is out at the tables, in the top tables, looking for any kind of anomaly, any type of point of interest, like a different hero, something outside the norm. And that's where we picked up Sam Dando, and that's where we picked up Cody Williams on chain and this and that. So what happens then is when we get the pairings, we basically say, here's what we want to see, because this has the best option, because the technical producers who are running the show and the judges who are basically organizing everything and whatnot, they don't have time or knowledge of what's going on and stuff, all the stuff that we've spoken about, the narratives that we're creating, etc. So we pick out we basically pick out the matches we want, the main screen match and the backup match, and then we give those table numbers to the judges who rush out and print out the deck lists and call those players to the main stage. And then there's about 5 minutes of drawing, or 3 to 5 minutes of drawing ahead of time while the players are getting shuffled up. And when we hear it in our ear, like, all right, game's ready to fire off, and then we kick it to the match and then get going. But oftentimes we don't even have deck lists when the games start. They get basically sort of slid to us under the table as we're broadcasting, or passed along to us while the game just begins, so that we can go through it. Very rarely do we have the deck list in advance, like as we're discussing the game, only later on, because we've already seen these players before. So that's kind of how it goes. So yeah, I mean, we do get to pick and choose who goes up there, but it's not a game of favorites. It's a game of who's interesting, who's unique, who's the best ambassador on screen for the game, so to speak.
I mean, there were so many big names on camera, so many stories developed. One funny little one, Brendan Patrick got over his stream hump finally, managed to get a win on camera. David Rood, I know from me being up north here, like that was a name I had heard, but I think for a lot of the community, like David Rood was a huge story.
Dave Rood for me is Dave Rood, is very intimately associated with Harry Tarantula, a place where I go play, a place where I love to be, a place that has some of the best players in the world. I mean, Isaac Crute, Sean Dollywall, like Joel Repta, David Root, obviously. Even players like Raymond Chow, double ProQuest winner Raymond Chow, whom a lot of people probably don't know about, but is an absolute assassin because he's the nicest guy and he's the most ruthless guy. So he's somebody who will beat you and then very kindly take the time to explain how he beat you. So he's a very, very generous with his time individual, very nice guy altogether. But David Root, to me, was somebody that I had, I'm not going to lie, I have immense bias towards wanting to see him win for two reasons. Number one, we're both from Montreal. He wears a Montreal Expos hat. I used to go to Montreal Expos games all the time. He's also been incredibly kind and generous to me with his time and allowing me to be part of the Hairy Tarantula community. Inviting me to the store, helping me with decks and stuff and talking strategy. But not only that, just being a good ambassador for the game in my region here within Toronto. Hairy Tarantula is it's like an institution here, and not just because the players there are great, which they are, but the store is awesome and the culture there is very positive. It's very awesome. Not to say that there aren't other great stores in the area. I mean, I did a pro quest at a place called Manta Trading, and Manta Trading is it's very small and it's a small little operation run by some exceptionally amazing people and now I'm so glad to hear that store is expanding. It's getting bigger. It's getting better. The people from there are awesome. Like, there's so many. Just Chimera Gaming, in Barrie, Ontario. So many awesome places to play cards. So many awesome places. And Dave Root, specifically seeing him in the quarterfinals and knowing that he's had a history in card games, and to see this kind of resurgence of him. And he always mentions, hey, I'm a dad first. I'm a father first, and I have responsibilities. And to see him succeed, he always gives so much credit to his team, and he always mentions privately, he's like, my team is so much better than I am. So when I went further than they did, it was a little bit of a surprise. But he owes them a lot of his success too. So it's awesome in that regard to see his success in that regard. And it was a little heartbreaking when he lost, but what can you do, man? I root for him every single day.
Yeah, no, and I got to experience a bit of that Hairy Tarantula community back when events were online. Tuesday nights, that was the one I would always look forward to. So they've got a great thing going on over there, and you love to see someone like David Root be as successful as he is. And I think in general, to go back to some of your comments there, that's a cool thing about the game we have here, is that it attracts, it attracts people who want to see that community grow, and we tend to prioritize, the inviting culture and humility and all those types of things over spiking events or what have you. And I think that's just such a cool thing for the future of our game. And out here in Western Canada, I can say that we're trying to foster that. It's cool to hear that out in Eastern Canada you guys are also fostering that.
It's awesome. I was gonna say you're absolutely right. It's like I can only speak to the region within where I'm in, but I don't think I've ever had heard from people where I say no, this region's all full of douchebags. I've never heard that. Whereas in various other games, perhaps there are pockets of areas that people are just nah, not for me. But never with Flesh and Blood.
You got to come down to my neck of the woods.
Is it just a cesspool of toxicity?
Yeah. Welcome to America.
No, we're good.
One of the scariest things to me is knowing that someone with the discipline of a professional football player has decided to take on trading card games. Tell me about Dalen Mack.
What is there to say about Dalen Mack? I will say this about Mr. Dalen Mack. If you discount and just disqualify the bread rolls from the all-you-can-eat meat, kind of Brazilian steakhouse meat place that we went to for dinner on Saturday, if you discount all of the bread rolls, I ate more than Dalen Mack at the all-you-can-eat Brazilian steakhouse. That is a fact that can be corroborated by several people who witnessed it. I don't know if he was just, he had day 2 to worry about, so he didn't want to eat too much. But
he's also in training camp mode, right? I believe.
Well,
close to it.
That is correct as well. Is that he was very much in a position where he was ready to just like tell his coaches like, hold on, I'm gonna be late because I have like a tournament to go to or something like that. I don't know, but he is definitely in training. He got drafted by so he was originally drafted in the NFL, and most recently he's going to be playing for the Tampa Bay Bandits, which is I forgot what league that is. I'm not a big football fan ultimately, but in terms of work ethic and USFL, that would be it. Correct. I believe he was like one of the top scouted players in his position. Like he's a big deal. But what impresses me the most, clearly not his eating habits because I crushed him, was the fact that I have never seen anybody or played with anybody that plays as much as him, that thinks about it as much as him, that focuses as much as him, that's committed as much as him to excellence. And I get it. Sometimes failure and losing games can really eat at you, but there's nobody who goes into the lab more than Dalen Mack, that changes his deck to fit an evolving meta more than Dalen Mack. No one plays more games than Dalen Mack. That one of the funny things is that every time I have a guest on my podcast, he always messages him and ask him how many games they play. And it's always like disappointing to him. I'm like, dude, I only think they only play like 5 or 6 games a day. He's like, what? Dude, I'm rocking like 15 to 20. I'm like, I know you are because you're constantly in my DMs telling me to play against you. So I'm like, that's the kind of dude he is. But I will say this. If there's anybody who's destined to win a calling, let alone multiple callings, it's going to be Dalen Mack, because like I said at the beginning of the show, hard work pays off, and there is no other pillar of hard work. There's no other beacon of hard work than Dalen Mack, and he inspired me because he got me to second seed at Harry Tarantula ProQuest off of Prism when Starvos were running rampant. He was the one who put me through that gauntlet and taught me how to play. I owe a lot of my own success competitively to his teaching, his patience with me. And yeah, we've had like our spats because we have different personalities and such, and like certain things that I don't see that he sees because he's that much smarter than me at the game. We have a little bit of our heated debates about things, but that's just how it is. We're both gamers, but man, like my arguments with Dalen Mack are over the internet because he would absolutely he would launch me into the sun if he was ever mad at me, because I think I weigh about $165 and he would just straight up Nolan Ryan fastball me into a passing planet. Like that's what he would do to me. But in terms of just competitive work ethic and such, Dalen Mack is going to win a calling. He's going to win multiple callings. As long as he stays interested in this game, he is a force. And I am so glad that I never have to square off against him in a pairing. Like, I think that there's no more terrifying thing than someone refreshes their pairings on their phone on the website and note that they're going to be playing against Dalen Mack in like a win-in or in a match that matters, because that is terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember catching your interview with him where even to go back to the comment about how many games you play in a day, and I think at the time his answer was 10. And I remember thinking, all right, that's probably the standard right now then. That's what I should be striving towards. And now to hear the numbers up into the 15 mark and plus, and it's like, oh God, I don't know if I can keep up with this. Like that's the amount of work that
constantly. What you'll notice on that podcast as well is that there's a constant clicking / fanning / like flickering noise because he's constantly goldfishing. He's constantly goldfishing. Like during the podcast. And I told him, I'm like, before we started recording, I'm like, put the cards down, Dalen. I'm like, put them in a drawer and show me your hands. Like, I want the podcast to be you like this, like with your hands up in the air in the camera. And he just couldn't do it because it's to him, he needs to constantly be goldfishing. He needs to constantly be working at it. And he was my favorite to win the calling in Indianapolis. But one thing that he noted at the end of that, and that everyone else did, as we mentioned earlier, was the overall level of competition it got upgraded. And everybody, if you're lagging behind, baby, like there's no time to stop and smell the roses because you will get lapped. The field is constantly moving.
Oh, 100%. People are hungry to be good at this game right now, and I notice it all the time. I've seen it throughout since Skirmish Season 1 when I started playing. I've noticed the compete level just increase, and I've heard other people talk about it, and it's moving forward. It's going to be a daunting task, winning events, and any event, from ProQuest to a calling to Jersey coming up. Like whoever is successful in that feat, that is going to be quite the accomplishment.
It was a bit of a perfect storm when you put a calling event like that in just on the tail end of 4 weeks of highly competitive CC play, just before that, where you've been testing for 2 months, and you're basically peaking right before that, and you get everyone right there at their most competitive. So it ended up working out really well.
Yeah, it certainly did. Now we've spoken a lot about your broadcasting and your playing, and another thing that you've kind of started. I don't know if this is a new thing for you, but certainly it's starting to pop up more now. Is some writing endeavors of yours? I've seen you've had some articles on CFB. You just had one go live on the Fab TCG website. Tell us a little more about that.
Well, writing is something that I've been doing for a long time. I used to write for my school paper. I used to write blogs and nonsense on MySpace and all that other garbage that you flick on My Chemical Romance and you write out your feelings on a blog post on MySpace. Like we've all been there, right? Like, so that's kind of where that was. But ultimately, the writing thing was where I began my interest in sort of journalism, and that's kind of where I kind of eventually learned. I'm like, hey, you got a big freaking mouth, Flake. I'm like, damn right I do. So this is all a conversation amongst myself. Like, so in my head, I was like, oh, why say words when I can speak them, right? Why write words when I can speak them? So I eventually just naturally progressed to just doing broadcasting in this regard, because it was something that I was very comfortable doing, and public speaking never bothered me. And I always worked with the public, be it, my bartending or whatever, and so it didn't bother me. I liked being able to speak and speak to people. The writing was then put aside because it was just never fruitful. It never felt like a fruitful use of my time to write stuff. And the problem with writing was also the fact that nobody cares unless you have a portfolio, unless you have anything. I'll say maybe 5-6 months ago, I approached various card local game stores and offered to write for their websites, and they're like, who the hell are you? Like, who cares? Like, go away. So I was like, okay. So I was like, I get it. I'm like, I have nothing to my name. It's very difficult to get started, like everything else is. It's difficult to get noticed when you don't have. Everybody wants somebody with experience, right? And so where's that first entry point? And to me, I was like, I'm going to start with the broadcast portion, and then we'll see what happens. And ultimately, after that, I approached Channel Fireball, because I already worked with them at the Nationals, and I said, hey, there's one thing that I'd like to do, and I'd like to offer an opportunity or offer an option here to write for you guys. And I know that you guys have a lot of pros, but that's not what I'm offering. I'm actually offering the opposite. I'm offering something from the people who are not quite pros, but are a little bit, around the above average. You have a lot of professionals out there who are telling you, how to increase your skill set by 1% because you've already won this major thing. Like, how do you win the Pro Tour? 99% of the people consuming this content are never going to win a major event. That's just the truth of it. But what about the people who want to, or at least want to place? There's not much content out there that appeals to the above average gamer. They're the person who wants to go from casual to competitive. That whole sphere of content is just relatively, I don't want to say relatively untouched, but it's not been explored, at least to a degree that I feel that when I wanted to do these things, there was nothing really out there for me to dive into and say wow, okay, this is how you can practice without a team. or this is how you deal with the mental fatigue of practicing or going to events and failing all the time. Like, how do you deal with that? So when I approached Channel Fireball, they were exceptionally receptive to the fact that they're like, damn right, like these are really good things. So I understand that the professional out there is not going to get a lick out of what I write, because it's not for them. It's for everyone else. It's my content is for the people who were like me, who are good at cards, who have experience, but never won anything or never even top 8'd. And they're kind of spinning their wheels and wondering what those problems are. So for me, the content is very much my own experiences that I've been playing card games, like I mentioned, for like 24 years. I've been there, I've done that, except won the big one. And I'm still striving. I would love to win a calling. But, at least in my own endeavors, I've moved along to the point where I top 8'd all these pro quests, so like that's good for me. Like I feel like I top 8'd 3 of 5 pro quests in this season and split a finish with somebody at one of them, and that's awesome for me. And I wanted to be able to write some of those experiences and relate to the players who go 4-2 at a pro quest and don't get and place like 15th or 6th or 13th or whatever. And I meet these people all the time. They're not going to get anything out of reading an article that says, you should be playing 3 Spinal Crushes instead of 2. That's not going to help them. That's not going to do anything for them. That's not going to really do anything. They're going to change the cards, go to the tournament, and go 4-2 again. That's not going to do anything for them. But what they're going to need is they have the skill set. They can clearly win. They've gone 4-2. But maybe things like misplays really dictate how the rest of the day goes. An early loss is just going to completely derail them, or things along those lines. Or maybe they don't have a testing team and they just don't know how to improve on their own. That's the kind of content that I write. So most recently, I had an article out. It's a 5-part series. The first part came out, I believe, late last night / this morning, being the 24th of March, for LSS on fabtcg.com. And it's about going from casual to competitive. That shift of gears of going from an armory to trying to win a skirmish or a pro quest or anything along those lines.
I did get a chance to read that article today, and I loved your thoughts in a lot of the ways, because I class myself as, one of those aspiring with hopeful for the pro scene, but I by no means do I mean to compare myself to, say, like the Tariq Patel's, the Matt Rogers, or anything like that. Is a lot of what you talked about reminded me of the path I'm kind of on right now. It reminded me why I'm on that path, and I thought it was such a good inspiration piece for anybody who is thinking about getting on that path. You're very blunt about the fact that it's not going to be easy, but nothing worth having is. And if you put in the work and you commit yourself, you can achieve great things. Whether somebody reads that article and they take inspiration from it for Flesh and Blood or something else entirely. You spoke a lot of truth in that article. Yeah, it was very well written.
Well, one thing that I wanted to just touch upon in that article is the fact that it's difficult for the average player to find any commonalities with the people who win these major tournaments. But you can find it, and there is something that you can take out of it. It's not like you can just... They're not waking up every morning and injecting skill into their veins and going to a tournament. There's elements that everybody can dig into that they need to also realize, is that it may seem like a daunting task, but the one thing that everybody has access to is hard work. And that is the one thing. And though the duration of that hard work and the opportunities may vary, the common variable that the world champion and Johnny X2 at the armory that has access to is the ability to work hard and want it. So if you've got that, you've got the jet fuel. It's just a matter of flicking the switch and getting going. The runway might look different, the top speed might look different, but the objective of just taking flight is there, and you've got the tools to do it. And that's what I want to really drive home. And I'm glad that you appreciate the article, because it is written for the non-champions. It's not written for top 8ers at a calling. It's written for everyone else.
Yeah, no, and you nailed the hammer on the head with that one. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
What comes next for Flake?
What comes next for Flake is a good question. There's a frozen pizza that's calling my name, but that is the most immediate. No. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying, like, that's usually my late evening. I eat very late. I wake up and I just, smash coffee until about 3 or 4 p.m. And that's usually the first time I eat is around 4 p.m. So I usually eat again late into the day, and I love it. It's like my favorite thing to just sit, watch a movie, relax, and have whatever the hell I'm eating. What's next for Flake, though? Frankly, that I can talk about, I guess. There's ProQuest, I believe. It hasn't been announced and nothing's been finalized or whatnot, but I'm very confident that they'll call me to do the casting for that. Again, nothing's set in stone, but it's one of those things where the wheels are in motion, and it's a matter of hoping and praying that they like me enough to say, hey, we want your big stupid mouth and your Star Wars references at the Pro Tour. So that's what's next. The podcast is still ongoing, and it's still very awesome for me to be able to talk to the wonderful people in the community. And more writing, and it's really reignited my passion for that particular medium, because I kind of let the writing aspect of my life kind of just lay dormant. And once I wrote my first CFB article, which was about dealing with how to deal with misplays, the next one just flowed, so smoothly and so easily. And then LSS essentially reached out and say, hey, we really liked your articles about appealing to the casual to average player. Can you do that for us? And I was like, let's do it. So more articles for sure, and hopefully another casting gig at Pro Tour. And if that doesn't fall out, if that falls apart, I will be at every single skirmish in ProQuest to try to get to that level that I want to be, which is I want to be able to dance with the best, and we'll see how that goes.
No, that's awesome to hear. You're certainly on the right path right now, and the fact that you're able to say you have things you're not allowed to talk about, that shows that you're heading in the right direction, and it's exciting to see.
Can you give us anything about those? Even just a little nibble of something.
Just a little bit. I will say this. All the talk and the sparkle and shine that James White tries to drop on Pro Tour New Jersey isn't without substance. It is going to be a big deal. I don't know too many details. I know some, of which I cannot speak. However, I will say that it is going to be. It's kind of like it's going to sort of be the equivalent of like LSS is like. That gunslinger that kicks down the saloon doors and everyone turns around and says, oh, this guy means business. That's kind of what Flesh and Blood is looking to do at that event. And if you can be there, holy hell, be there. Be there. If not, pay attention. It's going to be pretty sweet.
Oh, I'm certainly excited for it. I know I'm lucky enough to have a qualification. And Pat, I think you said you're planning on attending as well, right?
I'm looking at the qualification.
No,
I will be. I am going to try and take advantage of the 400 best players in the world not playing in the calling, and seeing what I can do with that. So I'll be there.
Flake, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Really cool to be able to hear some of your insights, hear a little bit more about your origin story, and get your perspective on where the game's at. Yeah, I just can't thank you enough. Before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug?
I just want to also just say that there's so much love out there in this community, and I've always been a big proponent of just pushing that those good vibes and whatever. And the fact that like this podcast, so many other podcasts out there, you guys keep doing what you're doing, because it is just so important to not from just the perspective of people just want to hear about the meta, but just the conversations and the relationships that are being developed in this community are immense. It's huge, and I love seeing those things develop. I love listening to other podcasts. I love seeing how other parts of the community, there's no animosity. It's it's everybody's friends, whether it's myself with you guys or you guys with other podcasts or other bits of community. Everybody has their ventures, and everyone has the things that they want to do, and putting in immensely hard work into these elements, and it fills my heart with a lot of hope and joy for this game, because there isn't that kind of it's not a competition. It's a rising tide raises all ships kind of scenario, and I want to thank you guys for doing what you do, because it's incredibly important. So you guys need to give yourselves a pat on the back, because it's huge, and so that's awesome to see. For myself, I mean, any pluggables would be the Instant Speed podcast on Twitch. Sorry, not Twitch. Oh my god. Okay. I started streaming Gwent again recently after a little hiatus, but twitch.tv/watchflake is where I stream, which cool. it comes in clips and phrases in terms of when I do that, but most recently I've been doing it a little bit more often. youtube.com/983media is the production company and the media company that basically produces all of my content, such as Instant Speed, such as In Response, such as the Versus series, things like that. So you can go check out the Instant Speed podcast there, as well as like Spotify, Apple Pods, Google Pods, all that other nonsense. But Twitter @WatchFlake or Instant Speed Pod on Twitter. And dude, reach out. I answer essentially every DM I get, unless it's absolute obscenity and nonsense. In which case I do answer it, but I make you look like a doofus. I answer every DM I get. That is a fact. I don't ignore anybody, because nobody deserves to be ignored. Everyone's got a story, so I'd like to hear it. Reach out. You might not like what I have to say, but at the end of the day, you're going to get a response. So yeah, cheers to everybody listening. You guys rock.
Awesome. Before we wrap up quickly on our end, we've got a couple of plugs as well. You can, as always, you can catch us anywhere podcasts are streamed, Spotify, Apple Music, what have you, or I should say Apple Podcasts. We are on Twitter. I am at FawnTooleryTCG. Pat is at PatSmashGood, and we are also at The Combat Chain. And I believe, Flake, you're at WatchFlake?
That's correct, because there was once upon a... So some jerk has been holding the Flake moniker on Twitter, on Twitch, on everything, and I just cannot seem to lock that thing down. I've inquired with everybody, so it's at WatchFlake, which is essentially like an instruction.
You gotta find that guy. Gotta find him.
Dude, hasn't tweeted in like a decade. The Twitch stream that they're doing that hasn't had anything. It has like 2 followers and hasn't done anything, and whatever. It's a whole other story.
We got an eminent domain on cyberspace here. Adam, I have one plug. I have lined up my next guest for the next episode of Fatigued, Parents Playing Flesh and Blood, and I am going to have the one and only Max Thomas coming on to the program. We're going to record tomorrow night, so I'm happy to have Mr. Thomas coming on. So that is my little thing right there.
Our outro here, Flake, we're going to try to get you in on this with us. So when we outro...
Oh, God. Oh, boy.
We got to get Flake in on it. When we outro, I'm going to say until next week, and then together we're all going to say we're closing the combat chain.
I'm in.
All right. Until next week, we're closing
the combat chain.
Love it.
You know what? That's better than some others. That was good.
Thanks for listening, everyone.